JRPGs started off fairly strong in 2023 with these 4 games, but if you could only buy one of them, which one should you buy? Well, lucky for you, I've played all of these, and in this video, I'll be sharing with you which ones I think are the most worth your precious time and money. I'll be going over 4 criteria and then giving you my recommendation. Let's start with the story for each of the games. Now for One Piece Odyssey, you play as the Straw Hat Pirates sailing the open seas, but you find an island and you want to explore it. However, a storm shipwrecks you on this island. And after gathering all of your crew together, you travel through something called Memoria, which is basically an altered version of past adventures from the One Piece show. Now you could play this game as a newcomer, however, this is very clearly aimed at One Piece fans. Now as someone that's not a huge One Piece fan, I don't really watch the show and I've only played a few games, I personally found this game a little bit slow and kinda uninteresting. The mystery of the island was kind of interesting, but it's sort of infrequent because you're going through all these past adventures, so it's not really a huge driving force. And also in my review, I saw a lot of people complaining that there was no English voiceover, so be wary of that. Overall, it's not bad, but certainly not the best of the bunch in this video, and clearly tailored towards One Piece fans. Next, let's take a look at Persona 3 Portable. Here you play as a transfer student at Gekkoukan High. When you arrive, you're placed in a sort of strange off-campus dorm. Here you learn about the Dark Hour, which is sort of a lost hour after midnight where a lot of weird things happen. Shortly after, you join Cease, a team that kind of investigates this Dark Hour, and your job is to discover the mystery behind the Dark Hour as well as the ominous Tower Tartarus. Overall, the story is pretty strong with a great cast of characters. That said, if you've never played 3 and you're coming from Persona 4 and 5, this is certainly the darkest of the 3. Now I'll say the mystery behind the Dark Hour and the social bonds you'll form with your teammates kept me hooked and will keep you hooked through the course of the game. It was all just very intriguing. That said, it's kind of held back from the limited visuals thanks to this being kind of a port of a PSP version. However, it does have English and Japanese voiceover. Next, we have Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters. These games take place in a world called Game Industry, where characters are basically representations of consoles and companies. Kind of a tongue-in-cheek and silly premise. In Sisters vs. Sisters, it focuses on the younger sisters of the main cast as they deal with the rise of smartphone gaming, or as they call it in this game, the R-phone. Now, much like One Piece, this game really relies on you being an existing fan, and it's not a great entry point. There's a lot of characters, and the game doesn't really go out of its way to explain any of them. For me personally, I didn't find it very interesting. Most of the story segments are told through these visual novel style segments, and after a while it can just kind of get boring. That said, I do like the character designs and the performances from the actors. All the characters are really cute and fun, but the actual story itself is just so uninteresting. I've always said this, but it really works better as an anime than a game. And lastly, we have Fire Emblem Engage. Here you play as the divine dragon Alir, awoken after a 1,000-year slumber. After you're awoken, you need to stop the resurrection of the fell dragon that you defeated 1,000 years prior. Now to do this, you'll need the power of Emblem Rings. These are sacred items in this world that can summon Emblem heroes, essentially past Fire Emblem protagonists. Overall, the story is a little bit shallow. Nothing super interesting happens, and to me it felt like a Saturday morning cartoon where there are stakes, but in the end you know that the good guys are going to win. Overall, it's not actively bad, it just doesn't have a lot of depth to it. That said, the individual characters are fun, they just don't get a lot of time to shine, especially because the bonding events are fairly short. Overall though, there are good performances from the actors, and they're kind of over the top as well. If you're not into that, there is Japanese voiceover available. Now here are my overall thoughts for the story for each game, with scores ranging from 1 to 10. Overall, I feel like Persona 3 Portable has the strongest story of the 4 despite it being held back by the limitations of the PSP, with Neptunia being the weakest, and it really is only meant for its hardcore audience. Next, let's move on to gameplay, and this time we'll start back up with Fire Emblem Engage. This is a turn-based tactical RPG where you'll bring a squad of up to 12 characters onto a map. Most of the objectives are either to clear out the entire map, defeat a specific character, or get to a specific spot on the map. Now each character class has a specific strength and weakness, and you'll need to keep this all in mind when you want to execute your strategy. And the main gimmick of this game is the engage mechanic. These are rings that you can equip on your characters, and once you engage with them, you can merge with that character, and this will activate stat increases, and you'll also get new abilities. Not only is it really fun, but it's a cool way to pay homage to past games. And when you're not in combat, you'll spend a lot of time back at your home base called the Somnial. Here you can interact with characters, improve your equipment, as well as a variety of other activities. In my opinion, this is the strongest gameplay the series has seen since it hit the mainstream back with Awakening. It has a great collection of maps and also does an awesome job of balancing challenge and fun. Now for Neptunia, it's an action RPG. You have your basic attacks, you have a attack that kind of charges up over time, as well as chain attacks when you switch to other characters, and you can also transform into your goddess form for a brief period of time to do big damage. Now your party consists of 3 characters at any given time, and you can swap between any of the characters on the fly that all have different combat styles. And to utilize this combat, you'll explore through pretty linear dungeons that, in my opinion, don't have very interesting designs. To put it bluntly, this is some of the worst action combat I've played in a long time. Now, to be fair, I've not played a lot of the other games in this series, so I don't know how they play, but relative to other action RPGs that I have played, this is just some of the worst. I think it really comes down to controls. Overall, it just feels really delayed, slow, and sluggish. Even when I move the camera with the right stick, it has this sort of weird momentum to it where it won't stop swinging around, and I just had a hard time controlling it. Unfortunately, controls are some of the hardest things to put into words when describing a game, but to say the least, it just doesn't feel right. For Persona 3 Portable, it has the same Persona game loop that you're familiar with if you've played the other modern Persona games. It's a good mix of dungeon crawling, turn-based combat, and life sim aspects. Now, the great turn-based combat system the series is known for is here. Each enemy has a weakness, and it's up to you to try to find them to trigger an all-out attack. Now, the dungeon isn't as interesting as in 4 and 5, where they're a little bit more tailored and story-specific, but here is essentially one big dungeon. That said, it is still fun to go to every different corner and try to find the stairs and all the different items on each floor. The life sim aspects here are great as well, as you get to know your classmates and other characters in the game, increasing your social links with them. Unfortunately, the game is a little bit gimped because of the PSP limitations, and a lot of what you do in the social aspect won't be as robust as it could be. Overall, it's still really fun, addictive, and compelling. Now for One Piece, it's a turn-based RPG with a robust set of exploration mechanics, and the combat does a lot of really unique and cool things. So you'll have a party of up to 4 at any given time, and they're kind of split in between these little mini arenas within the same battle. And as for the mechanics themselves, there's a sort of rock, paper, scissors weakness system where each character is given a different type, and so do the enemies, so you have to keep that in mind as you're swapping out characters and trying to figure out who to attack. And the game also adds a really unique twist called dramatic scenes. Essentially, these are little mini combat challenges within battles to earn you extra experience points. And also, if the combat is a little too slow or you're just trying to speed things along, there is a speed up mechanic to keep it going faster. Overall, I found the combat really solid, although I felt like there was a little too much of it and it kind of got tedious after a while. One thing I did like and wish there was more of was the exploration. Every character has some sort of unique exploration mechanic. For example, Luffy can stretch out his arms to reach new areas, Usopp can shoot down items with his slingshot, and Nami can find money. When you do get a chance to utilize these in dungeons and just exploring the world, they're really fun, but again, it's just not utilized often enough. Now, in terms of just the pure gameplay, I felt like Fire Emblem Engage was the strongest, with Persona 3 Portable coming in a very close second. Again, One Piece was pretty good, but not great, with Neptunia being the absolute weakest and just simply not fun to play at all. Next, let's move on to presentation for each game, and again, we'll start back up with One Piece. I thought One Piece was a really nice looking game. There's a lot of great details, they represent the characters really well in 3D, and there were just some fantastic animations. And I play this on PlayStation 5 and it runs at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second. I saw a lot of people liken this to Dragon Quest XI, and I thought that was pretty fair. My one criticism is that the user interface is a little over-designed in my opinion. It can be kind of hard to tell what's going on in combat, but overall it still looks pretty good and stylized. There's also a really great soundtrack that fits the mood of the game well, and overall I just thought the presentation of One Piece Odyssey was solid. For Persona 3 Portable, this is probably where the biggest knocks are going to come against the game. Now, it's a port of a PSP game that was a port of a PS2 game, and it shows. The character models don't look great at all. And hurting the game even more is stripping out the ability to walk around the environments, and the game is basically just a menu outside of the dungeon crawling, which is a real shame. Now, because this is a remaster, it does load faster, run at a higher resolution, and a higher frame rate. And while you don't see a lot of in-game visuals, the character portraits still look pretty nice and have a cool style to them. And also, that soundtrack is still as bumpin' as ever. Now for Neptunia, it's kinda all over the place. I genuinely think the character designs are pretty fantastic and look great in the visual novel segments. However, the in-game visuals don't look great. On PlayStation 5, it only runs at 30 frames per second, which is baffling. And just from a presentational point of view, it kinda looks like a PS3 game. It doesn't look good, and the lighting also looks kinda blown out. It's just too bright. Not to mention some pretty poor animations. The music is fine, it's kinda cool and cutesy, if not a little forgettable. Now for Fire Emblem Engage, this is going to be very subjective, but I personally loved the look. It's really crisp and has a kind of cutesy look to it, which I like. Overall, I thought it had great character designs that all have their individual flair, and at a quick glance, you can just tell who each character was. Not to mention some great animations in and out of combat. You can just get a sense of each character's personality simply by how they move, and that's a big credit to the animators. Weirdly enough though, I felt like the music was kinda forgettable. Most Fire Emblem games have a few memorable tracks, but as I think about the music from this game, nothing really stands out. Now again, this is subjective, but I love how Fire Emblem Engage looks. It just has a very crisp art style with some great character designs. And One Piece does look really great as well. Unfortunately, Persona 3 Portable was held back by the limitations of the PSP. Thankfully though, the music and the character art still looks fantastic. And for Neptunia, it's once again kinda all over the place. Lastly, let's touch on the overall value for the game. For me, this is a combination of quality, price, and length. And I know not everyone can afford every game that comes out, so I know each of these points is important to you. Now for One Piece Odyssey, it's still at full price at $59.99. Will take you about 35 hours to complete, and if I had to give it an overall value for quality, I would say it's the most 7 out of 10 game I can think of. Doesn't do anything actively bad, but doesn't do anything super fantastic either. For Persona 3 Portable, it's only $19.99, will probably take you 60 plus hours easily to finish, so to me the value of this game is an easy 9 out of 10. Super long, super great game, and not that expensive. For Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters, it's only $49.99, will take you about 30 to 40 hours to finish, but in my opinion, the overall quality of the game just isn't great. It being longer is almost a hindrance because it's so unfun to play. So for me, I would give it a 3 out of 10. And lastly, we have Fire Emblem Engage, which is still $59.99, will take you about 40 to 50 hours to complete, and overall the quality of the game is just fantastic. And I would give that a 9 out of 10. And really, these scores kind of reflect my overall feelings for each game. Now, if I had to recommend just one game, if you had $60 to spend on just one game this month, I would go with Fire Emblem Engage. It's super high quality and will last you a long time. That said, if you can't quite afford a full $60 game and you haven't played Persona 3 before, for $19.99, man, that is a total steal. That would easily come in second. Now, those are just my thoughts, but what are yours? Which of these have you played and which ones are you planning on picking up? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see what other JRPGs are coming out the rest of this year, be sure to check out this video right here. And special thanks to Reset Switch, Tyler Kuzawa, and the Miyazaki Man for supporting me over on Patreon. To get exclusive videos and other cool perks, consider supporting me over on patreon.com/thegaming shelf. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.